All right, welcome everybody. Our next session is a panel discussion about engagement and retention, and I would like to welcome our moderator Peggy, who will introduce all the panelists. Please enjoy.
Thank you very much. So everyone, welcome today. I mean, it's important because I'm looking a lot at retention. The industry is looking a lot at retention. Is the goal, it's the game changer. It's what matters, particularly in these times when you're thinking about how to get more value out of your budget. We know that a single digit increase in retention can mean double or even triple digit increase in profits. That's huge. That's what we want to find out about it. We want to understand the strategies, but also the tactics, the benchmarks, the shortcuts, the hacks, even if there are any. So in this panel, we will hear from the experts, learn the basics to engage with users, keep them coming back to your app again and again. And we have a great panel, and almost in the order that we're appearing down here, so that's great. So we have Murad Musakaev. He is Project Business Development Manager at Full HP Limited. That's a game studio, perhaps best known for shooter games, including Mad Guns and New Battle Forces FPS. Been in the studio since about 2017, I believe, and instrumental in helping Full HP discover new revenue channels and boost retention by almost 2x and revenue by 60%. So this is going to be an interesting talk, and all of that without significant marketing spend rather. Ada Dubrawska, Associate Product Manager at Clue. That's a menstrual health app. Thank you, Ada. Welcome here. You're very fortunate because you count an extremely loyal user base of over 12 million users from 180 different countries. And you have experience in social media to engineering. So really, absolutely both hemispheres, the brain in sync there, but found your place in CRM. And you'll be talking with us about messaging, metrics, experimentation. I'll switch it up because I did have Steve next, but he'll come in shortly, I think. Tatu Petersen-Jessen, Art Director at Rovio with the hoodie. Thank you for being here, Tatu. Worked in various creative and management roles in probably more than 40 published games at companies including Digital Chocolate, Remedy, and Rovio, which is where you are now. You're an art director at Rovio. Focused on casual puzzle games at Rovio's Puzzle Studio, so bringing a lot of insights into how creative impacts retention, which I'm excited to be hearing. And we have Steve Moy, Product Director, Product Madness. Steve has a long and impressive track record in the industry, working in gaming, mostly social casino and mid-core, at renowned companies, Zynga, Harmonix, and Gree, as well as startups, Conduit and Enway. Wealth of knowledge across the pipeline, and going to talk about what keeps users hooked and coming back. And speaking of coming back, I hope very much, Steve, that you can come back soon, because I think you're having some problems there, but we'll get there in a moment. Let me just switch off the slides so we can go to camera so we all know who we are. And here we are indeed. And Steve, you're here. Fantastic. If you can just unmute, we will be able to enjoy. Yeah. There you go. Now we're ready to rock and roll. Perfect. And I have to say that although this is an amazing admin back here, I'm not seeing the time. So I'm hoping that our MC will tell me about the time, because it's not showing on my screen for some reason, the most important point. So anyway, we're here, we're virtual. This is it. This is the new normal for us, working from home, having a virtual conference, having a great time today. A lot of sessions, a lot to learn. But I'd like to learn from you first, about your companies. What is going on with you personally in your companies? I mean, it's marketing in the era of COVID-19, other pandemics, unfortunately, to consider if you're looking at certain geographies such as North America. What's changed for you? How are you engaging your audience? I mean, for example, I'll start maybe with, I'll start maybe with you, Murad, because you have, one of those types of apps, one of those types of games that's really enjoying a lot of interaction at this time. But massive growth must at sometimes be too much of a good thing. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. So we have experienced an enormous boost of downloads, and retention has grown like never before. We have day one retention of 61% right now, which is beyond our fantasies. We never experienced something like that before. And so our usual retention of day one is about 39, 40, something like that. And now it's 20% higher. And in terms of monetization, we see how balance is pulled to the ad monetization side. I think because people don't want to spend a lot of money these times, and they prefer the free ways to, get some stuff in the game. And we increased the number of events in games and on social media. So every week we introduce something new. Plus we give away a lot of free stuff, so our players have a property that will serve as an anchor and lure them back in our games when the pandemic is gone. So we added more social activities so players can join their friends, spend time together. So, they feel they are not alone at these times. They feel socialized.
Okay. So positive impact, you also have to adapt to retain. Maybe Tatu, you want to tell me what it's like? Again, puzzle games. Again, these are the genres we're hearing had, an ironically positive impact in a pandemic.
Yeah, we have indeed seen growth within casual and puzzle games. There's more people also looking for new games, new things to do, spending a lot of time indoors. Our games are perfect for that. So what we are trying to adapt to this new situation is that we're trying to, as much as possible, enable them to spend as much of that new free time in our apps as possible. So we're doing a lot of things like enabling longer sessions with unlimited lives and so
on. I'll skip around. I'll stay with games for a moment because I think, Ada, your story is the most interesting because of the type of app and the type of engagement. But Steve, let's check in a little bit to what you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, so thank you, Peggy, for moderating this. Thank you to the Mobile Growth Association for moving this summit online. It's really exciting to do this. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting for us, right? Because these are really extraordinary times, like literally extraordinary. We have a pandemic. We now have worldwide protests, not just in the US, over the murder of George Floyd, that will hopefully push some change. And in the meantime, we're just here focusing on our apps. Product Madness is a maker of social casino apps, and our biggest problems as an organization right now is that we can't really get haircuts, and the pubs are all closed. Like our results, we're very, very, very fortunate, essentially with everything else that so many people in the world are dealing with right now. And I think it's throughout the games industry and hopefully throughout the mobile industry. But we're just seeing KPI uplifts almost across the board, and been sustained so far. And we just feel very fortunate overall.
Well, Ada, I saved the best for last year because you're a different type of app. And it's not really about, a change in use because, there's only so much period tracking a woman is going to do. But there is a difference, I would imagine, in other behavior, around that, maybe even mental health for that matter. What are you seeing?
Yeah, as you said, people with cycles are going to bleed whether there is a pandemic or not, and they're going to want to keep tracking it and keep track of that to identify any patterns of change. At first, we thought that perhaps we would see more users tracking, perhaps we would see more people coming back to the app, but it seems that the stress around is my period late because of stress or something else versus just being so overloaded with health-related information balanced itself out. So we're seeing quite similar numbers in terms of engagement and retention on the user side of things. But something that our science team does want to look into in the long run is how this whole situation is impacting people. Because you can not only track the bleeding that you experience or the pain around it, but also mental health things, as you mentioned, like stress, like levels of motivation, or even things like, having a party and going out with friends, because alcohol consumption and such can also impact your cycle. So we're very interested in looking at that once a couple more months pass and we have a number of cycles worth of data to see if that fluctuation cycle to cycle is impacted by the pandemic. But again, as I said, not much difference on the engagement and retention side because, well, if you're going to track a symptom, you're going to track it.
Absolutely, and we'll hear more about the CRM focus here to keep people engaged, because there's something you do between those times in the month. Here I am feeling a little bit like Star Trek here. I'm going to start a poll. We understand where you all are in your lives, and I'd like to understand, what is your job function? Submit? Is it on now, I believe? I believe it is on. I'm hoping that it's on. Yes, okay. Poll is open, I believe, that asking you where you are in your lives, to understand that, and to understand how we can help you, because this is about education. This is a session that we're doing because we understand that this is extremely important, but to help you, we have to understand how many of you are focused on user engagement or user acquisition, retention, monetization. So we're asking you your job function right now. We'll let that poll go for a while. And we'll switch back to where we are here. So, many of you are seeing an uplift, but what is it that you are seeing around the audiences you've attracted? I mean, what can you advise the audience, our audience here, because they have newly engaged users, but it's about keeping those newly engaged users. I mean, maybe Steve, you'll tell me a little bit about how to keep engaged users when things return to the normal or new normal, or maybe there isn't one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so that's the biggest question, and one of the things that we're spending a lot of resources. I'm personally looking into a lot, sort of from the product design, product management perspective right now. So we have seen a tremendous uptick, both in organic and in paid users coming in both in terms of genuinely new users and in reactivated users. And yeah, a lot of our focus right now, just like you said, Peggy, is on how do we keep these users. So we have a long-standing push, just like a lot of mobile game companies, towards the new user experience, towards the kind of curating the different flows and the different outcomes for new users that join the game, or join our different games. And yeah, I mean, most of what we're doing right now is really fine-tuning. Like we're kind of getting ready for the fact that we know at some point, or it's already happening in a lot of places around the world, I think a little bit less here in the UK, but in a lot of places around the world, people are now having more and more free time to spend. So we are desperately trying to make sure that we can give players kind of the same value in their session and entertainment in maybe shorter sessions. So we're looking right now very much at things like loading times, for instance, to make the experience smoother for our players.
So also I'm hearing very much a focus on some life cycle understanding, some life cycle management. Tatu, for you as well, it's about not only entertaining, but also very much understanding the audience, because if you understand where they're coming from, literally, then you can shape an experience that will keep them coming back. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that also where the user journey starts, that it kind of starts from the first impression, from the first creative, the first ad that you're showing to that audience. And we've also seen that it can have a huge effect on all the metrics on engagement, from retention to monetization. So depending on what kind of audiences you're driving to your game, you're going to be getting totally different kind of engagement and totally different kind of retention numbers. And that's the kind of one thing that I feel like it's probably the most important thing to understand, is that how do you drive the right kind of audiences in your game. And for example, for us, like it's finding the balance between kind of like, when are we misleading our audiences and trying to advertise something that is not there, and when are we really selling them the value proposition and actually serving the needs on their side. And you also have to understand like what is the need that your game, especially like on the game side, like you could easily just say that it's entertainment, but often it's much more deeper than that. Some people are looking for relaxation. Some people are looking for just de-stressing. Some people are looking for more for more excitement in their lives. So it all starts from
the ad, is what you're
creative,
telling. From the very first create, which is why you are.
And noticing what is the need you're.
Oh, I think we lost him for just a moment, but he is a creative director, so we'll get back to some of those insights.
And then following up with all the features.
Okay, maybe some bandwidth issues there. I'll stop there for a moment. Murad, I mean, you have a similar issue. You're not heavily into marketing, but you're getting an interesting audience. In some cases, 30 years old and more playing games you never expected. How do you deal with that? Do you say, it starts with the creative, but it didn't start with that for you. So how are you engaging that audience? Or deciding maybe not to, because it's not your typical audience, or is it?
No, of course we are trying to engage them. Just to say the least, our main audience, our usual audience, is from 13 to 25. And during the lockdown, we experienced some unexpected users attracted in our app. And I'm talking about over 30 years old users. That's just not our audience. We, to be honest, were not ready for that. And of course, their paying ability is above average. And for us, it's vital to make them stay and to give them something that will keep them in our games. So we try to convert them to paying users with extremely profitable personal offers. And it seems that the plan is working, as we see from our analytics. And they accumulate a lot of virtual items right now. We introduced even more content in the latest update. And to give them a sense of purpose and progression, we created the new type of daily reward system just for this category of users, because we track the behavior of user, and if it's a paying user, we give him even more retaining elements. If it's the not paying user, we give him more elements that will convert him to the paying user. And before the quarantine, we integrated a lot of additional analytic events, and that will help us to run the retargeting campaign if something goes wrong, and this user will churn. So that's what we basically do at the moment.
Okay, so it's really about understanding also, as you said, where the user is in the journey. I want to understand where our audience is actually, and I do believe we have our poll, and if our MC, Matej, can make it public.
Yeah,
I'm not
just a second.
Okay.
It should be public. If it not, I can say that we have 23 responses, 15 people from user acquisition, 9 people from engagement, 9 from retention, and 8 from the monetization. Okay, so not surprising. It's more about UA. We're moving into retention marketing. That's why we have this session, and also why we have why I'm looking at it. I have an ongoing video interview and podcast series, Retention Masterclass, looking at just this because it is that hot of a topic. Ada, it's all about what I'm hearing. It's about being extremely honest from the get-go. Now, you look like someone who would do that, and your app has to do that. I have to understand it. It's not really about advertising necessarily to me. Maybe that's not the first touch point. What is it that influences engagement for you?
So for us, it is largely a question of why is the user there? Because when you're tracking your period, then maybe all you want to know is when are you going to bleed the next time, to know that you can be prepared for the bleeding itself and for any symptoms that you experience with it, like cramps. But some people track their cycle in order to get pregnant, or some people may track their cycle in order to monitor some other symptoms and health conditions may be associated with a new birth control type they're trying, or maybe associated with an existing illness. Like a lot of people will have PCOS or endometriosis, which are both cycle-related conditions that exhibit certain symptoms throughout the cycle. So some people will be tracking that, or maybe their mental health, or maybe their stress levels. Or maybe there's someone like me who noticed that they have different levels of energy throughout the cycle and are trying to figure it out and to better plan throughout the month. So we try to get a handle on that pretty early on with an in-app poll of sorts, where we ask the user what is their main focus in using the app. Is it just the period? So then we know that we should engage with them probably around the time when they're expected to bleed, or probably give them more information around the regularity of cycles or the quantity of blood you're expected to lose. Whereas people who are trying to get pregnant will definitely be more interested in content around fertility, around tracking their fluid, which provides information on how fertile you are in your cycle, maybe on using ovulation tests, because ovulation is the period when you can get pregnant. So it's just going to be very different user needs and content needs. And because we do have a hub of content at helloblue.com around menstrual and sexual health, that is something that we can pull from and put into push messages and app messages, newsletters, what have you. So then we're able to deliver more meaningful content to the user.
So very much content, then asking outright in a poll. We talked a lot about how it starts from the first impression. Literally, the first impression will bring the user into the funnel. And what you show is what you get in many ways. Let's just put it that way. In games, there's a lot of player psychology. There's a lot of thinking about, well, if I have this type of gameplay or I have this type of feature, I will get this type of audience. And there's a fascinating science about that. But I'll start with you, Murad. What are the other ways, that help you get the audience or decide the audience or segment that audience so that what you're attracting is what's important to your app, but also what allows you to have a very high chance, very high confidence that you'll have high retention throughout?
So the secret is
Okay, we're waiting.
in acquiring the loyal users. It's something that Tatu already mentioned. We have a big problem in the industry right now. We have a lot of misleading creatives. We get a lot of misleading ads when users see some puzzle gameplay, then he enters the game and the game is the real-time strategy. And he's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. And for us, the best way to acquire the loyal users is the App Store optimization. And I'm talking not about just keywords. We're talking about the whole package from keywords and localization to icon and screenshots adaptation, the description, all that. So, for example, when we released the new game Battle Forces in soft launch, we made the first screenshots, just a first shot to, check how the audience will respond. And they were pale with a poor choice of camera angles and character poses, just because we, messed up. And the new screenshots, they are bright, colorful, and they are packed with action scenes because it's shooter, So the results of A/B testing, they were great, and it's just the beginning of the soft launch. So there is a lot of room for optimization. We can, localize the pages for different countries because different tricks work in different countries. For example, when we work with Japan, we do completely different screenshots because of the different mentality, because of the different culture. And if we speak about the user acquisition strategies, then we had some campaigns. We are not very, experienced in that, but what we had were video creatives and text ads. And for us, text ads, they totally worth a shot because you're not only buying yourself a place in search results, but you also get a better indication in the search results when user search for a specific keyword. For example, he's looking for shooter online, and if he choose our game from the list when it's promoted by the text ads, then we get the better indication for this specific keyword. So you can kill two birds with one stone using the text ads. That's why we keep using it until today.
Makes also A/B testing a little bit more straightforward. And we shouldn't understate the importance of localization on creatives to even now. I mean, it sounds like it's something you would have heard 3 years ago. It's still working a lot now. I've seen a number of companies increase retention by as much as 10x just by having the right ad, right audience. Tatu, that's what you do for a living as a creative director. We talked about the big secret when Murad answered, what's the big answer? There are no big answers, but I'd love to hear some lessons, learnings, or what you apply in order to attract the right audience, the right cohorts with the right creatives? I mean, one thing is definitely a lot of A/B testing, but what else?
Yeah, a lot of A/B testing. Also looking at the performance of the creatives on creative level and placement level. So some ad that works in Facebook doesn't necessarily work in the ad networks, and vice versa. So you also have to kind of understand the user experience of watching the ad, whether it's skippable, whether you're forced to watch it all the way to the end. All of these affect the experience of watching the ad and can have huge effects on whether the person makes the download decision.
Sort of the ad user experience as well. Steve, can you add something to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, sure. So for the, I don't get too involved on, the creative side of things. I can say a little bit that we have done some localization on some of our products. Like most of our users tend to be English speaking. And we've also experimented with doing some localization just on the creatives, just on some of the App Store assets, because that's much easier than doing localization within an app, which even if you're kind of localization ready, like there's still a lot more heavy lifting, I think, comparatively than to try a few campaigns with localized creatives and with a localized app store. In terms of the actual game itself, when we think, just to go back a little bit, like when we think about engagement and segmentation, we're really trying to design for how can we get everybody to this kind of happy place, for us at least, where and for the players, because it's not successful if the players aren't really having a good time in the long run, where they are playing the game multiple times a week. They feel comfortable making payments. They understand the value in making a payment. They don't have buyer's remorse. And I think all of those things are important, even from a user acquisition standpoint, because they influence in the long run like what your lifetime value is of your user, and that will influence like what your marketing budget is. So I can't emphasize enough, and we can talk about some different ways to do this, but the importance of having kind of product and marketing teams working together. Yes. Because kind of going back to the misleading ads point, like if you can be getting a ton of users for a great CPI, but if you have misleading ads and the users aren't really performing once they come into your application, like it's not really going to be that valuable for you for the bottom line.
Absolutely not. You're going to have burnt cash. Did you want to add something, Murad? Or
no, I'm just totally agreed. Can't agree more.
We're all like, yes, absolutely. I mean, it makes the point. So to sort of like backtrack and bring this together, we've talked about how it starts with the first impression. So the creative needs to be on the mark. If it's not about the creative, you have a type of app that's more of a utility or helpful, onboarding, polls, questions at the beginning to make certain that this journey that I'm going to give you in the app is what you expect and what is going to be useful and valuable to you. So I've got you in the funnel, and now I want to keep you there. And that's the next question I have to our panel is, it's about understanding also at some level, now that I have you in sort of a customized user journey, how do I keep you there? How do I customize the experience from there? I've gotten you in and said, like, I'm opening up this door just for you. This is what you're going to experience. Now I want to keep you. Ada, that's something that you have to do really well from the get-go, because if I don't trust you, if I don't think you understand me, then I'm not going to use your app.
Yeah, totally. And trust is such a big part of using a health app, especially a health app that is meant to store your data. So making sure that our users understand how securely we treat their data and with how much care we handle them is hugely important to us. So one thing that we do to help gain users' trust on that front, the security front, is our CEO wrote a series of blog posts about what happens with the data you track. And so she talked to like each of our teams and discovered, how exactly we're doing this. And she ran this post by us, like, is this accurate? Is this what we do? And so we were able to launch this Journey of a Data Point blog series on hello.com, and then link to it in our onboarding materials. And actually, one of our 3 or 4 onboarding emails is solely dedicated to the safety of your data and explaining how we would never sell it, would never share it with advertisers. It is your health data. We're not going to share it with, insurance agencies that would then raise your premiums and so on. How we're not going to do that because that's unethical from our standpoint. How we can't just go into the system and look you up and see if you're having a period right now or not, and base our, support reply on that. How we don't base our advertising internally on what you're tracking. We only base it on your level of engagement. So when I am targeting my campaigns, for instance, I don't know if you're bleeding or not. I only know that last time you used the app was 4 days ago. And we have a lot of people that use the app only for tracking their bleeds, but we also have people that use it only during ovulation time because they're trying to get pregnant, or they use it throughout their cycle every couple of days, just recording their symptoms. So we, as the CRM team, for instance, don't know what's going on with them exactly. But that's where this engagement data comes in, that we, for instance, know that you tracked some sort of data every single day. So then we know we can offer you more content and a richer experience in terms of the support we're giving you to help you understand the app. We might see that you're tracking data, every couple weeks. And then we can remind you that, hey, you can customize the categories you're tracking. You're not only stuck with the basic ones, but all of the other 30 are free. So why not use them? This is the window where you can do that. And we're just making sure that users, first and foremost, understand what they're doing. And then when we see any struggle points, we simply add in campaigns and A/B tests and really test everything to make sure that the point is understood. So our main metric in any experiment that we're running is always the top level, engagement or retention metrics, such as, did the user successfully set up a reminder after we told them how to do it? Or was it maybe unclear? Or maybe are the reminders not necessary for that type of user?
So it's really, really very much about asking outright, because there are many ways you can customize. You can sort of second guess, or you can ask outright, or you can also augment your ability to do this, which is what I believe you're doing as well, Tatu, over at Rovio. It's very much understanding the data, not just to be prescriptive and say, here's a great customized journey for you, but also be predictive, which I think is really the key here. We're not there yet, but where are you now?
Yeah, we're using, for example, bots and machine learning for trying to predict churn in casual games. In puzzle games, it's mostly related to level funnel, and we use all the data that we get from our bots to make better level funnels for our games. But we can also use the same data about the predicting about the churn to keep the players engaged with our games. So in case we notice that somebody is about to churn, we can start giving them more cross promotion to our other apps, and that way keep them in our ecosystem.
That's also a thing with you, Steve, as well, because you have a very strong focus on a life cycle approach.
Yeah, so we have some of those similar tools. Like we have some some fairly comprehensive models built out for things like churn prediction, payer prediction, and those might trigger what types of like CRM offers you get, like whether you get a retention triggering offer or something where we're just giving you a lot more free currency to keep you in the game if you're a newer user, or where we're maybe giving you a deal because we think maybe it's a good spot for you to make a purchase. I think one thing that I will emphasize, it's important to draw a line though, right? So for us, we have a very firm line drawn as a social casino company where we never actually change any of the odds or any of the outcomes of the games themselves, like based on anything about your player profile, anything about your history, or anything else. Like those are all 100% purely random, and so that's part of our culture and something that we feel is a bit crossing the line to trigger those, even though I think a lot of our players, even players that go into real money casinos, always think that the games are rigged or doing this or that against them. And I would say in general, one thing that also we sometimes struggle, like we have a lot of live operations events, and we do worry sometimes about actually almost over segmenting and over tuning. And I think as a, kind of more as a product designer, one of the things to keep in mind for a player experience and a player journey is that people want to see the value in their, particularly if they've invested their real money in it, they really want to see the value in what they've paid for. So it's fine for players to win some and to feel like they're overpowered and to be given the easier tuning, say for an event that is designed for the typical player to take 5 days to get through, and they can smash through it in 50 minutes because they paid and they've built a lot more power in the game. And I think that's an important principle and something to keep in mind when we talk about sort of the life cycle of players and the segmentation of players.
And also keeping them invested in the game. That's also an element of engagement. You're keeping them interested and keeping them through the right events and through scripting certain events. What about you, Murad? You do something a bit different because you have talked about how you use your app store optimization to get, and others, localization, other approaches to get the right users in. What about customizing that experience to keep them coming back?
Well, our retaining politics, it's divided into parts. First, we of course have some game designing elements. So from the new content to some systems that keep players to progress through our game, like battle passes, daily rewards, personal offers, and all that. And on the other side, we have our social media campaigns, because our target audience, as I said before, is Gen Z. And it's easier and cheaper to reach them through the relevant sources like TikTok, Facebook, or other social media, because they spend a lot of time there and all of their friends are there. And we have these two systems connected by sharing systems. So when you have some new content, you can share on your social media. When you win in the game, you share it on social media. You can invite your friends from your social media to play with you inside the game. And when we call for our audience on social media, we use a lot of provocative creatives because we need to stand out, and our call to action is challenging, like, I bet you can make up to top 5 in this battle royal, and our players be like, who are you calling a loser? And they downloading the game just to prove that somebody on the internet is wrong. And it may be good, may be bad, but this is the psychology of our target audience. We crack that sometime, and I think that it really works for us because we track a lot of people coming from social media, because it's like 20% of our organic traffic.
Okay, so again, making certain that customization starts because you understand the channels and you carry that consistently throughout is what I'm hearing here.
Yeah, it's relevant channels, relevant sources.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to skip around a little bit because we do have some questions coming in, and I do want to encourage everyone to ask questions. We've got experts here from sort of across the ecosystem, different types of game genres, also helpful, useful, utility, personal app, a lot of opportunities to hear different perspectives. So do keep those questions coming in. So I'll skip around a little bit. I was going to ask about metrics that you look at, but maybe we'll just do that very quickly because I think that's it's a key question, but it's a simple one. You have to understand, to extend retention, you have to understand your natural retention curve, and you have to understand natural usage. If you have something like Ada's app, you're not maybe going to it every day. So that's not the kind of data you want to be looking at. So I'll just take it very quickly from the top, maybe starting with you, Tatu. You have a puzzle game. What kind of metrics are you looking at? Because you can have a very long retention cycle, actually, for a puzzle game if it's engaging, and yours, of course, are.
Yeah, we're of course looking at all the normal metrics. One of the newer metrics that we've started to look more at is the cost per payer, just to see what is the actual cost for acquiring the right audiences. We're also in most cases the whole math behind the game is like how much is the cost per user, and especially cost per payer, and then like what's the expected lifetime value for those users. And if the cost is lower than the lifetime value, that's pretty much the whole equation there.
It's similar for you, Steve, isn't it? Or do you have a certain sort of tweak on that because you do not have a puzzle game?
Yeah, we have the social casino titles, but I mean, I think in terms of what we do, it's very similar. And obviously, yeah, I mean, all the same top line metrics everybody else looks at are important to us. I would emphasize the importance of having a good, solid lifetime value model, because if you can spend if you can accurately predict day 180 or even day 365 lifetime value, that makes it much easier to be confident in your campaign budgets. I think obviously tracking LTV and other KPIs by campaign is very important. And it's as an organization matures, I think there's other services that can offer this, but tracking your attribution, tracking your users by campaign, and seeing how they perform, and eventually maybe even modifying your game experience, especially for new users, is important. Technical KPIs are something that often get overlooked, but things like frame rates, loading times, size on device, app not responsive rates on Google Play, I think those are all good to look at. And finally, one thing I would pitch that I've always been a proponent of is tracking user sentiment, like via something like Net Promoter Score, often kind of, or even just looking at like number of CS tickets generated, things like that, can do a good job of letting you understand, like, are your players just happy with your game in general? And we're running services here really kind of in the long run, whether it's a game or an app, and you want your customers to be satisfied, and you want them to, that's a really good indicator of what whether you're going to have retention problems maybe 3, 6, 12 months out. You can start to see that a little bit early if you track sentiment via something like Net Promoter Score.
What about you, Ada? You have, of course, different metrics that you're watching. What are you looking at to say, hey, I'm on track here? And also, you have a very long retention curve. Usually before all of this kicks in, I have to have maybe used your app for several months to start.
Yeah, so that is something that is problematic when you're trying to run dynamic A/B tests on, your messaging early on in the life cycle, when your typical retention metric is month over month. That's why we started using proxy retention metrics. So instead of looking at the whole, first 90 days, which is our typical curve for an onboarding user, like once they've tracked 3 cycles, they're having a chance to really see the value of predictions. And so, something flickered on my screen, sorry. But as you're seeing them progress through the 3 months, it's not really feasible to have an A/B test running for a full quarter and only then alter something. So we do look at the first week or first 2 weeks, and then from that predict how it's going to perform onwards. In terms of campaign metrics, we try to do our A/B test iteratively, because we do have 12 million monthly active users that are tracking their periods. So we are able to really target a lot of people on a certain day of their life cycle and see how that performs over the next week or the next month. And so we're really looking at the shorter term metrics to predict long term and adjusting as needed as we see a long-term impact. So it hasn't happened so far yet that the predictive model versus the real model would be very different. But if it did, then we would certainly look at that model again and try to make tweaks. We do also in our monetization campaigns especially look at the types of purchases. So we have a 1, 6, and 12-month package. And so obviously we want to optimize for 12 months just for, being able to A, deliver more value, and B, actually have that money up front, because that does help pay our bills and keep us running. But ultimately, in terms of an engagement metric, we look at the data you track. So how many times has the user tracked data per month? It's not just about sessions, it's about inputting the data, because that's what generates value.
Okay, so we've got a lot about what you need to look at, metrics to measure, approaches, customization. We have some questions, and I'd like to go to those. I can't, however, see them for some reason. I did see them all come in. Maybe our MC
Yep.
can read one of them out?
Just a second. Yeah, of course. So Gail is asking how to deal with the fact that sometimes our ads appear on questionable websites. How to deal with the reaction of groups like Sleeping Giants, or how to be politically correct and economically profitable. This is the question from Gil.
Okay, who wants to take it? I mean, we don't have too much time coming here, but I'm sure that one of you would have that. Steve, I think you might be able to take it, or Ada, certainly.
I can say, I think with this panel, I think none of us are on the direct performance marketing side. So, I can kind of just give, high level, almost just personal opinion, which is, I think you need to stay on top of that a bit in the market, unfortunately, right? And by working with more reputable vendors that give you more options, you should be able to stem most of that. I think every, unfortunately, I think probably almost any network you can run into cases where you find yourself being promoted on a content or application that you don't really want to be associated with, and I think just having a responsive provider that can help you identify that and shut that down quickly is the most you can hope for.
Okay, I think there was another question there. Again, I'm sorry, in my panel, and I cannot see the questions. I can see them coming in. Does someone read it out?
Of course, there is also a question about localization and importance of localization at the creative/ASO level to start a funnel with the right foot. So how do you cope with the workload this implies when trying to grow many countries and many apps at the same time? Do you have any sets of best practices to keep it lean, employ technology, or outsource it?
Yeah, I could take that. I already answered in the Q&A session. I don't know if I successfully published my answer though. So what I would say is that start with those locales or countries or language areas that are more likely to make the big impact. So starting from, for example, France, Germany, Asian countries like Japan, and focusing on those first, and A/B testing whether it makes sense for your app or not. In some areas it doesn't make big difference, but I would assume that, for example, the apps like for games, not necessarily so big difference, but for health app like the one that Ada is running, it's huge difference, I would imagine.
Yeah, and from my end, what I can add is that because we are at Clue, a global app, we're localized into 15 languages already. So it is quite natural for us to already have some copy in those languages that we can simply use on an ad creative. And we also are a very international office. So sometimes when it's a question of a tiny tweak, or just like, is there any popular phrases that are being used in your cultural circles today? We're able to submit that to our ASO expert. And so I am originally Polish American, so I am fluent in Polish. So I'm able to pick up on, Polish advertising and what's happening there, and share that with our ASO expert to make sure that our Polish localization is as good as it can get. And we've also had success grouping some regions. So for instance, for us, many countries in the Western section of the EU work quite similarly in terms of results on different types of advertising, but then the US behaves a little bit differently, or further east markets behave a bit differently. So we might group, Korea and Japan under the same experiment, since we are localized into both Korean and Japanese, and just run the same A/B test, having the assets localized into each language, but without localizing the graphic itself.
Okay,
so
we
that's
have
something that
one more question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we will end in like 30 seconds, so I'm not sure if there is enough time to answer it, but there is question about how to do paid retargeting or CRM efforts for users who are predicted to churn. If you have a couple of seconds,
yeah,
you can answer.
So something that we do at Clue is we see your drop-off in tracking or your drop-off in number of sessions per month. And when we spot that, we try to reactivate you with push. So we'll send you a push message like, hey, are you getting the most value? Can you be tracking more? Do you want to activate more categories or set a reminder? And that tends to help bring users back.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Murad, Ada, Tatu, Steve, and our audience. Thanks so much for joining. Hang around, enjoy more. There's plenty of sessions, and we'll be going to one right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.